I don't know, like, she's out there. You're the Florida version of Sex and the City, JD.
That's when I was smoking my cigars.
Don't be an asshole today. Another one. Another big show.
It's another big show. Yes.
Wait, let me get. I'm freezing.
Super excited.
Freezing, man. Okay.
Are you freezing? Really?
Oh my God. It's just so bitter cold, honestly.
Oh my God, I am jealous. I'm jealous.
So I'm freezing. Okay, so here we go. We have the 80s TV ladies podcasters.
Yes.
Ready?
Yeah.
We got a ton of stuff to talk about with them. So 1 and 2, Sharon and Susan.
Here they come.
It's so exciting.
It is.
Dun, dun, dun. It's Susan, right?
Yes, I'm Susan.
And Sharon's coming.
Sharon is still. Hold on.
Hey.
Hey.
Hello. Oh my gosh.
Oh, look, they got all They got professional.
Yes. Yes, they
Well,
did.
Sometimes we just like Zoom from where we are, but we had to do a couple other things today.
So you're not in the same place because your backgrounds look similar.
We are in the same place. We're in actually, like, and again, it looks more professional than it actually. That's my
Look at that.
our studio.
Look at that.
Panels help with our sound.
You know, that's professional. That's like totally pro. You know.
Well, so my office, I produce. So it sounds like, what am I got? I got the sound on.
Yeah.
Is that it? Is that it?
I'm not sure. Yeah,
I think it's you. No,
Susan, do you have the cable plugged in for the?
I do.
Okay, it might not be selected because I'm not getting audio from Zoom.
Hold on. So we're so pro. No, I have produced an album out of this garage. Half of the album. Where is it coming from?
Can you just check the settings on there?
Okay, there we go.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, that's the problem. Hold on.
Is it for both? No.
This is better. We're not hearing anything. Can you hear me?
You know, JD, you can take this time and like fluff and primp and everything.
Oh, we're not. That's right. Yes.
The important
That's
stuff.
what you usually do in 2 seconds before everybody comes on.
You know
can you guys?
me. I was wanting to fluff. Yes, much better.
All right. Can you guys
We
hear
did it.
me?
I totally can hear you.
Excellent. Excellent.
Mhm.
Excellent.
I've rehearsed plays in my in this garage. I've recorded half an album. And
Wow.
Now we're podcasting. So it's sort of my little home office, whatever.
Like a studio.
It is like a studio. We actually also shot and made a web show from here. So
Oh,
it's like my own little private Idaho.
That's how my spare room was in my little condo in Florida when we first started doing podcasting back in 2006.
wow.
Yeah, like no one knew what it was. But
They called it, I think they called it internet radio. They didn't really have a word,
Yeah.
right? I don't think they said podcast or maybe I'm wrong.
we did broadcast live for the first like 3 years, and then it was so hard to ask people to show up at the same time, and they did though, but you know, to show up at the same time, and because we had an interactive chat room and all that stuff. So yeah, that room was seriously like a little studio, and it's fun, you know, it's fun. You can be as creative as you want, but podcasting, you know, seems to be the way forward. I think I was just a little ahead of my time, but
Totally.
yeah. But now everybody's got one.
Everybody's got a podcast.
But the cool thing is that I feel like you guys have honed in on such a niche topic, you know, because who doesn't know an 80s TV lady, you know? And
Right.
honestly, it's when I was like scrolling and looking, and I'm like, oh my God, Stephanie Powers, Stephanie Zimbalist, and you know,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
on the list, and I'm cracking up because I was like, oh my God, my mother used to have Stephanie Powers hair, you know?
Oh my God.
It's like it was going down, like I was going down a rabbit hole with all that.
For my sister's
Oh, that's
wedding,
funny.
she wanted us all to have big hair. And so I think I took out like the side of a door jamb or something because it was just wasn't going anywhere.
And the hairspray, because it had to be
Yeah.
so big.
Oh yeah, it was stiff.
Yeah. Yep.
Gonna take
Yeah,
out an
yeah.
eye. But
Jeez.
sorry, so
funny.
where are you guys? One of you is in Florida and one of you in London?
Yeah. I'm in Florida,
Okay.
I'm in
in
London.
Boca.
Wow, what time? Oh,
Ah,
Very nice.
love it.
bless her heart. Okay.
This way you can keep it straight. Yeah, I'm here, but I'm heading to Florida in a week from Friday,
Yay.
a week from tomorrow.
God. And so how
Um,
long will you get to be in Florida?
I am there till the 31st because JD is playing at her and her band are playing at West Palm Beach Pride, and
Mhm.
can't miss it. Gotta go.
Gonna be awesome.
Gotta
we're
go.
gonna be-
Go.
Yeah, we gotta do some rainbow remix footage there or something.
Something like
Some
that.
kind of something. Yeah.
It's actually like my favorite Pride Fest because it's not anything like a New York City Pride or a San Francisco Pride. It's this gorgeous little park that's on a lake, and it's, you know, it's this, you see the same faces every year, and it feels like everybody's all in tight. You can't miss anything. You're not like ready to pass out tired when you're done, you know. It's just been
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
they got
Not
that
too
nice-
big.
yeah, and
It's
and that
doable.
gorgeous amphitheater that
Mhm.
you guys get to play. So yeah,
Yes.
it is. It's one of my favorites. It's a lot of faces and a lot of good vendor stalls and food and entertainment in a tiny condensed space, and it's,
Mhm.
you know, it's like nothing else. It's really one of my favorites. So I'm super glad I'll be there for that. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm going to visit my parents. But
This
yeah, there's
happens
that,
to
but
be.
come on.
This happens to be.
right. So yeah, so we'll be hanging out together for a little bit, but I've been here for 12 years now.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's you know, it's it is what it is.
Did you come for business, for love?
No, my
for-
wife is
Okay.
Australian, and then one of our
Mm.
listeners gave her a job here in London, so she moved to London. And then back then, like 2008, we couldn't get married anywhere, so we ended up flying to Canada, getting married, and then I moved here.
Wow.
Yeah,
Quite a
Wow.
story.
to be
Quite a
together.
story.
I
To
know,
be
I know.
together.
All because of a podcast, because she heard me on a podcast. We
Mhm.
Are
started
you serious?
Wow.
Oh
Yeah.
my God,
the
that
power
is
of
fantastic.
podcasting.
She's like,
It's a story.
That's my
It's a
woman.
story.
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah. It's
You
pretty
really
fun.
heard you on a podcast.
Yeah.
And then did she reach out? Did you guys?
Yeah,
have
she
mutual
wrote
friends?
in and said, you know, like we were fumbling. It was probably like our first, sometime within our first year, and we were just fumbling like so bad. We were so new at it, me and my friend, and so she emailed and she said, I'm in Australia. I found your podcast. I absolutely love it, and I have some questions. And she had these really interesting questions because they were like, what was your favorite lunchbox when you were little? You know, what was your favorite snack? And, you know, things, like
Mhm.
that, you know, whatever. And, but the questions spawned such great conversation, and, you know, always like a trip down memory lane. And then our chat room people would get in on it and answer it. And they, so I was like, oh my God, look at the engagement we're getting here. You know, so I emailed her back after the first time we read it on the air, and I was like, could you do this every week? Like, could you write in and ask us like goofy questions or whatever every week? And she said yes. And so for 3 years, like every week she would mail us in questions, and she, you know, would have a little, you know, how you doing? I'm, you know, still, she was at university at the time. So I just, kind of considered her like a college kid, and then all these years went by and she had graduated and she got her teaching degree and she was teaching and it was her first summer break. And she wrote and said, I'm coming to Florida with my friend James, and we're going to New York and LA, but we want to know if we could stop off in Miami. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So yeah, they came for 4 days and that was pretty much it. We knew.
Did you know a
The
little
rest
bit
is his-
before?
Did I know what?
Did you know a little bit before? Like, was it like, oh, this will be interesting? Or
Yeah,
or-
well, the thing was, I didn't do the math. So in my head, I still kind of thought that she was going to be this like geeky little college kid. And she stepped out of the car and I was like, oh, wow. Like, I didn't even want to make eye contact because I felt like I would be leering, So I was kind of like, and she thought that I wanted nothing to do with her because I wouldn't even look. But but yeah, we got over that. And yeah, we just knew we had something and we had to figure out how to make it work. And so we did the long distance thing for 3 years. And then, like I said, one of our listeners, who we met on a cruise, and we ended up being really close with, offered Gemma a job in London. And it was like, oh, that's a little closer, 27 hours. Nope. 8. Yes, we can do that. So yeah, she gave up teaching and became a consultant for my friend's business. And we have been here ever since.
now, was it this podcast or was it a different podcast?
No, it was
No, 'cause
it was a lesbian lounge. It was an old
Lesbian Lounge. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
cool.
So it was, yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, it's really we had JD on a million times, probably more than anyone, we would crank
I
call.
loved coming on.
Well, how did you guys meet in Florida?
Yeah, we've been friends forever because,
Yeah.
I would, my old co-host Donna and I would do a lot of Pride Fest and we would introduce JD. So we ended up
Yeah.
being friends and everything. And then, we invited her to the studio and to be on the podcast. But then once we got familiar with her, we would just like crank call her all the time. She was like, oh,
And
I'm in Target. And I'm like, oh, tell me what's in
Oh
your
my God.
basket, and we would just throw her on the air all the time. But yeah, so we've always been good friends. So this
And then I would call in, if I was traveling a little bit more at that time. I was
Yeah.
playing bases around the country, military bases, and I was recording in Nashville, but it seemed like I was this world traveler on this tour that was never ending, but I was going like on a weekend and coming back. I wasn't on this never ending tour, but it just kind of seemed that way because here I am in Nashville, here I am in Alabama.
Yeah.
But if I was there on the night you were doing the show, I would always call in and be like, hey girls.
Yeah.
It was just funny.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we've had this connection for like a long time. And then, during COVID, I was editing old shows to make them current. And JD like hit me up and was like, hey, you want to do a podcast? I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, let's do it. So yeah, we've been doing this for a while now, but the thing I like about it is that we get to meet like such cool people. And I love supporting other podcasters where I think sometimes other podcasters feel a little weird about sharing a spotlight, So I was so excited when you guys said yes, because
Yeah.
Oh,
I just think it's a great, like I said, it's a great niche. Jay and I always are talking about 80s nostalgia, like
Love
I
Love
heard
it.
you talking about some and particularly 80s music, which of course is clearly close to my heart.
rain.
There it is.
That's a popular show.
But yeah, like I think for most of us, like, that are in this age group, like that's like a hug. When you talk about 80s TV ladies, it's like a hug. I just think like this, especially sitcom moms, you know?
Yes.
Like, weren't we kind of raised by them a little bit?
Yes. So we raised a lot by television. You know, my mom was a working mom and and a single mom. And so we would come home from school and you know, I was a latchkey kid. We'd let ourselves in, do our homework in front of the television, you know, eat all the snacks in the house. And, you know, then my mom would get home from work and make dinner and we wouldn't be hungry.
It's a
I
beautiful-
wasn't a latchkey kid, but I was definitely raised by television. I was always fascinated by it. My father was in the Air Force, and we spent 4 years in Japan. And the night we got home, we got back to the States. We were staying at my uncle's house in Oakland. I couldn't sleep as usual because I sleep on a plane,
right.
and I'm up downstairs in the family room in the basement watching Blood and Sand on TV because it's in English.
That's
and
all that
I have-
mattered at that time,
Yes,
right?
exactly. I'd seen maybe 2 or 3 things in English when we were living in Japan. That didn't mean that I didn't watch television in Japan, because I did, which is a very interesting exercise.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you'd be surprised at how much you can glean by just watching what people do and
Oh,
inflection
totally.
and all
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I also remember this very slapsticky, broad comedy that was on Saturday nights that really didn't require a lot of dialogue to understand what was happening.
Exactly.
So,
I mean, I was addicted to I think it was called MXC. You know, it was kind of like a Japanese game show where they would just have people doing these crazy ass stunts. And I was just like,
Oh,
wow.
okay. I think
you know, I would call my friend and be like, put this channel on. And then I would sit on the phone and be like, is this the most insane stuff you've ever seen? They're trying to cross like a wooden rickety bridge, and then all these
feels-
like enemies are throwing like have a big
N-
shooter
Nerf things at them.
pummeling them with volleyballs.
It feels
Yes.
like it was the precursor to the what's the big this
Wipeout.
huge show.
Wipeout, yeah.
Well,
Wipeout.
before Wipeout.
Well-
I mean, or after Wipeout.
There actually was
American Ninja.
Yes.
but there actually was a show on ABC called I was on or got lost on a Japanese game show or something like
Oh, I
that. And they
believe
did
it.
all
Yeah.
that crazy stuff. I
Yeah,
love that
these
show.
weren't like they weren't like big action packed sets, you know, that
Right.
were, you know, I mean, it was just out in the middle of nowhere, you know, and they would just like have to crawl through like a pond that had sludge in it and look for stuff. And it was just the most humiliating stuff. And they were so happy to do it. So it was like, oh my God, me and my friends, honestly, we would get super stoned and we would watch it and just laugh all night. It was crazy. But that's what I mean. Like, we didn't understand a word that was being said. Thank God they had like a comedian doing the voiceover, you know, to kind of
Mm.
explain everything. But it was, you know, it was crazy. And that's what I get. Like, they didn't even need the voiceover. Like, it would just be funny without it. But when I was in Spain, that we went to Barcelona for a friend of mine's birthday, and there were no subtitles or English channels or anything, so everything was in Spanish, and that was fun. Kind of like when your remote gets stuck on SAP. Like that. But yeah, I think we were all like, do you have favorites? Like, do you have? Because I have so many that I don't know that I could pick one, but like
mean
a
during for
favorite
80s TV?
80s TV,
Yeah, I think
or
we actually
lady, or lady, you
Yeah.
know, yeah.
Well, I think we kind of started with actually 2 of our favorites. Susan's was Scarecrow and Mrs. King, and mine was Remington Steele. I
Oh,
always loved
Scarecrow and Miss
Remington Steele.
King. I had a
Do you,
bad.
do you
for Kate
remember
Jackson.
Scarecrow and Mrs. King?
Yeah, I had
Oh,
a bad for
yes,
Kate Jackson.
She
And
was,
Jackson, the smart one.
yeah, I didn't know, but I knew. You know what I mean? Like, I was little.
Oh, was she one of the like? Was that part of like? Oh, I don't know, but I know. Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah, and my mom loved Bruce Boxleitner, so it worked out really well because she would want to
Yes.
watch that, and I'd be like, okay, because well, first like Sabrina Duncan, you know, like
Yes.
it
Yeah.
started then, the smart one, and
Yeah.
yeah, and then when that came on, I was a little bit older. So yeah, things were clicking. Things were clicking right around then. That was a big
Right around then.
part of it.
What are some of the shows? So what do? You discuss the shows on the podcast? Like what is your format for?
So it started because I was watching, 80s. I was watching everything during COVID, right?
Yes.
Right.
And watching a lot of 70s and 80s television, Newhart. I'm a huge Cannell fan, Stephen J. Cannell fan, and
Yeah.
and the A Team and Hardcastle McCormick also loved 80s shows. But I particularly looking back at them, I noticed then, but I really notice now, like there's no women, and if there are women, they're gone by the end of season 1. Like if they're,
Yeah.
and you're like, why is that? Like he got so many other things right. Why was he kicking the women to the curb? And I was like, oh, somebody should do a podcast about the women in television, and particularly 80s television, because it was very odd time, right? A very formative
Yeah.
time for television. And so then I was like, oh, well, I guess I should do that. So, and so I was like, Sharon, who knows way more, she's watched more television than I have, and has, I don't know, we've known each other since the 80s. So it worked out to say, hey, do you want to come talk? So it was just going to be us talking, but I was going to try to get interviews, but we've actually had a lot of success getting interviews with 80s television makers
Oh my
and
God.
modern
Oh.
television makers who will come on and talk about the shows that were either
Like
impactful to them or they
producers,
studied.
writers, like
So
that.
writers, producers. So I'm married. My husband is Richard Hatem, who is a television writer and producer. And so through him and through other friends, I went to USC Film School. So I know a lot of people that are working in television. So it's also, I figured, well, at least we could get on some modern television people and say, what were your favorite 80s shows?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so that's happening too. But we also were like, well, it doesn't hurt to reach out. So we reached out, starting with Scarecrow Mrs. King, and we got to Martha Smith, and we got to Eugenie Ross Lemming. And one of the reasons I remember Scarecrow Mrs. King so fondly is it was the first television show that I recognized female names in the credits as executive producer and showrunner. And as somebody that was interested, it was sort of that like, wait, these are people's jobs? Oh, wait, that's a woman? Now, weirdly, I didn't notice Eugenie Ross Lemming's name first. I noticed the second season showrunner was a woman by the name of Juanita Bartlett. And I knew her name because her name was also on the Rockford Files, which was another show that I watched.
God, yes.
And so she was an
Remember those?
early writer and showrunner in Hollywood, and she wasn't working on the woman's show, right? Like, so Juanita Bartlett I've always been fascinated by her. You don't hear a lot about her. She passed away in like 2017, something like that. But she worked on the Rockford Files. She ran several of the Rockford Files movies. She was the executive producer. She was on Greatest American Hero. She worked on, she ran a season of In the Heat of the Night. She ran a season and a half of Scarecrow Mrs. King, where she was the executive producer. There weren't that many, right?
No.
Women doing that. And then Scarecrow Mrs. King was also co-created by a woman, Eugenie Ross Lemming, and her partner, Brad Buckner, were the creators of Scarecrow Mrs. King.
Oh, wow.
And there's a whole story behind that, because they basically ended up walking off the show because it was very difficult to produce. And the more successful they became, the more difficult it was. And they were very young. And she's like, I wouldn't walk off it now.
Yeah.
We probably wouldn't walk off it now. But at the time we were like, life's too short. This is no fun anymore. We're out. So
It's commendable. It's actually
And
commendable.
she's still working today. She was I don't know how many years she was showrunner on Supernatural, but certainly in the final season, probably last few
wow.
seasons, she was a showrunner.
So
Look
she
how
and
far
her
we've come.
co-writer partner have been on all sorts of things. They created Lois and Clark, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and then they were on and then ran Supernatural for several seasons. I think they
Oh,
were on for
wow.
almost the whole
Wow.
run of of that
That's
show.
crazy.
So they're
That's done forever,
very
isn't it?
impressive.
Yeah.
And so what I think we found as we started to track down women and talk to them that were working in the 80s is they're great and we're having a blast. So now it's become like a big part of the show. So
That's
we
huge.
when we
It
cover a show,
Yeah.
we try to do an overview of the show. We're not doing a walkthrough. We're not there. It's not an episode by episode walkthrough.
Right.
We started off looking at sort of season by season, but now we're looking more at like an overview of the show. Just like, okay, here's some information about the show. Here's why it was important in the 80s. Here's the women that were involved in it. And then if we can, bring on people that were involved in the show to talk about it, and bring on modern like television makers,
Yes.
some of which are actually people that worked in the 80s too,
Yeah.
but some are not, and talk about the show. So in
Yeah.
season 2, we're going to have Jane Espenson and Drew Greenberg, and they're really well-known television makers now. They both worked on Buffy. They worked on Drew Greenberg ran The Shield, not the Shield, but the Agents of Shield. Shield, yes, that one. Those
Wait,
are very
that's
different
totally
shows.
different. Okay.
Totally
Right,
different.
right.
Sorry.
You guys,
And-
God, when you're saying how few women, it kind of struck me because Tuesday night we had Sharon Glass on the show, and
I saw that. I
yeah,
saw
yeah.
that. We had Sharon Glass on the show. Yes,
Yes.
we love Sharon Glass. She's
Yeah.
in Florida. Was
she
she-
Yeah.
she lives in Florida. Yep, yep. but
Oh,
yeah,
she
she's-
lives here? I didn't know she lives here. I thought she
yeah,
was
lives
visiting.
on Star Island.
Where- Ah,
Fisher
okay, that
Island,
makes
one of those
sense.
places, one of those islands in Miami. But yeah, how about Barney Rosenzweig though? Like he, Barbara Corday
Yes.
was, doing Cagney and Lacey's forever. Like I remember when I was 15, I wrote a Cagney and Lacey script, and I remember had to get my
Wow.
parents' signature to submit it,
Uh-huh.
and got my rejection letter from Barbara Corday.
That is
Wow.
amazing. That is
Sticking my
really
head.
impressive.
Yeah, that's one thing we didn't learn, that they would take submissions like that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did a lot of research back then. I was reading.
I was going to say just the like, oh, I'm going to write a script and
I
then
know.
submit
Yeah.
it.
I was going to be a famous television writer when I was. Yeah. I remember I just like locked myself in a guest room with a Corona typewriter for the whole summer. Like didn't even
Aw.
I know. Didn't even
You
go
know, it's
out.
interesting. It didn't occur to me as I mean, I was and am still an avid television watcher, but it never occurred to me that I would be able to produce or write or do
Imagine
anything to actually
like at
make
15 thinking you
television.
could. I know. I was like 15 and thinking I had to go buy like the book to show you how to write.
Right,
actual
right.
Script
And so what was, do you remember the name of the book?
it was something for writers. I
Yeah.
forget what it was. I remember
Now
buying
they
it
probably-
at Walden Bookstore in the mall.
Wow.
They probably
that's
have
because-
like apps now. I think
Yeah.
they have
Oh, yeah,
apps.
now-
yeah.
you
Now I
can-
got Duet, like rocking Duet.
That's the thing. It's so much easier to access information.
Yeah.
So my husband was writing A-Team scripts and Hardcastle McCormick scripts at 15.
Was
Um,
he?
Ah,
Yeah, and
Oh,
submitting them and
dude,
trying
I'm
to
so
get them
proud
and
of you
being
too.
rejected. Yeah, but it never occurred to me.
Geek.
It never occurred to me really, even though I was noticing women's names on the credits, I still didn't really quite realize that the television shows were written. Like I figured movies were written, but television shows, it's just like, oh, let's get in a room and we'll just like, we'll take the car down the street. Like I just,
Improv a little.
yeah.
And I paid
Well,
no
I
attention
did- I-
whatsoever to the names on the screen. To me, they were just taking up space before we got to the action or whatever
I
the comedy
totally-
was.
I researched the shit out of it for like a year before I actually sat down and was like, okay, like really heavily researched. And, but that's what struck me was that I'm like, I wanted it, like, I just thought I had an in because she was a woman. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I had
yeah.
a genuine in, I still have the rejection letter today, but
That is amazing. And so you thought you had an in because it was a female driven show.
yeah.
And what did you decide? Do you remember what your story was
Yes.
for them?
Yeah.
And what did you decide? Like, what did you feel about those characters as
Well,
as
I
you
had been
what
watching,
did you discover? Okay.
like, I watched it, obviously from the beginning, I was a huge fan, like to the point of like my birthday cakes were decorated like television sets with the blue Cagney and Lacey writing.
Aw,
Yeah, like I was a like crazy fan. And so I had this idea that like a runaway would kind of take to Cagney, and she would like, let this kid in her home and all this other stuff. But and then, the thing was, I got the rejection letter, and then the following season there was an episode where Mary Beth's son ran away and went to Cagney's, and they
I
like
was gonna
they were
say.
very familiar lines, and I was like,
Mhm.
but anyways,
Ah.
I cut to like 2011, and I end up working for Sharon while she was over here doing a play. And I told her the story about the script. And she was just like, "Are you kidding?" And I'm like, "No." She was like, "How old?" I was like, "The summer before I turned 15." She was like, "What?"
That's so impressive.
It was so funny. That was so funny. And we still, that trip, that at that time, I met Barney, and he's like, I was saying this on Tuesday, he's extremely intimidating. Like, I don't know if you read his blog, but he's
Well,
very opinionated.
yes, we had him on the show. We have just dropped the Barney episodes.
Did you?
Yeah,
Oh,
so it's a two-parter
wow.
because we sort of said, hello, Barney, nice to have you on the show. And then he talked for about 3.5 hours.
I believe that.
But
Listen,
it was
all,
great.
it was all
It
fascinating.
was
Yeah, he's a-
fantastic.
And we could still
font
be
of
talking because
information.
there were so many roads we didn't go down because
Right.
they're just but yeah, it was great.
But
Weren't-
he is
weren't
an
you
old school
impressed?
producer.
Oh,
Yeah,
totally.
he is old
Yeah,
school
totally.
producer, man.
Big time.
He reminds me of people I met when I first came to LA.
Oh, I believe that. And like,
Yeah.
were you impressed with his passion for getting women out
Yes.
there? Like,
Yes,
that to me was
absolutely.
amazing. That's what we talked about for the 20 minutes that I allowed myself before I was like, I got to get out of here. It was like too much, but no, we were actually, we were waiting for a car, and just picked his brain a little bit. But that's the thing that impressed me the most, is that even now, present time, he's still such an advocate for, women writers, women showrunners, women driven series. And back then it was almost unheard of,
Mhm.
and
Yeah, it's insane that he created that show.
Yeah.
And pushed so hard. And when you watch that show is very carefully put together. I give him a lot of props for
Yeah.
not
Mhm.
just for women, but for the stories they took on:
Oh,
abortion,
big, heavy topic.
Yeah. Oh,
alcoholism,
yeah.
all this kind of
Domestic
stuff.
violence.
Like
yeah.
their
Yep.
third episode or something was basically going, well, the cops are racist. If I'm a black kid, I'm not going to get
Mhm.
a real shake from you guys. So
Right.
and they have to, they're like, are we really not like, and
Yeah.
you're like, it's 1982. How
Yes.
are you doing
Right.
that?
Yeah,
It's-
that's right. Yeah.
It's just, it's amazing to me, like right through to like the trials of Rosie O'Neill,
Yes.
again,
Mhm.
that was so, that felt groundbreaking in its own right. And it's just amazing that people didn't get on board.
It is amazing
back then.
that it still feels like groundbreaking on some level. It
Yeah,
shouldn't
It
feel
still feels
as
like it's like a
amazing.
struggle. I mean, you got Shonda Rhimes, that's,
Right.
that now, that has shown that you can have an empire.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what's been interesting in going back and looking at these shows is you're seeing things like what was happening on Cagney and Lacey and Scarecrow and Mrs. King and Remington Steele. There was a lot of envelope pushing going on these shows
Yeah.
that
They were trying.
surprised me. I
They're
had
trying.
forgotten. Yeah. And the fact that even today, it seemed like there were things that today they wouldn't put on television.
Right.
In some
Yeah.
ways was a little disheartening.
Even on the sitcoms, like the Golden Girls, they had. I was watching something the other day, a thing about. I think it was on Instagram, but they covered topics back then, like HIV and AIDS. They covered Blanche's brother was gay. They
Yeah,
covered domestic violence. They covered teen pregnancy. Like, and it was a sitcom, so you would think like they wouldn't have touched upon those subjects, but they did. I mean,
so true.
they really, yeah, they.
Well, yeah.
For that time, you would think that it wouldn't be topics they would pick for a sitcom.
Right.
Well, I think I think Golden Girls in particular is standing on the shoulders of both All in the Family, but also Maude, obviously.
Yeah,
And
Maude.
Right,
Maude in
right,
the 70s
right.
was
Very
also
true.
covering those and breaking ground
Yeah.
and All in the
Mhm.
Family to talk about issues in a way that made it possible, I think, for a lot of American families
Yeah.
to have a way to voice
Totally.
conversations in their own home. I think that's an interesting thing that was happening. And Golden Girls, again, was just so much fun. I mean, we haven't covered that show yet, but we have looked at
Yeah.
it for other reasons, you know,
You
when
know
we're
what's
talking about something
funny
else.
is
And
you know
yet
the
to bring
great-
in those stuff. Go ahead. Yeah.
when there's books written about them.
Right, right.
I know, I'm sure you read, well, Barney's, Cagney, Lacey,
Yes.
and me, but my friend Frank DeCaro, who was a XM Sirius radio talk show host, he was on the Daily Show. His partner Jim just wrote like Forever Golden, and it's about like all the behind the scenes. He's got another one for the Love Boat, and he goes and interviews all the people that were, on the Love Boat and everything. And he,
It's a lot of interviews.
crazy.
And everybody was on the Love Boat.
Yes.
That's the great thing is
Right. A lot of
everybody.
people.
But
I
would
miss
wa-
that.
would
I really
follow him on
do.
Facebook, and he would have like
Yeah.
a list, if
Yeah.
anybody knows, and the list would be like 9 miles long. Of
Well,
people.
Who did we talk to that had done a love and the like it never occurred to me that they were also just going on a cruise to make the show.
I know.
Like,
Yeah.
I thought it was all sets, but apparently that's why people would do it because they would
Oh.
get a cruise to Cabo San Lucas, like or whatever. Like you're like,
Really?
Yeah,
they actually are taking, and particularly the European ones, everybody wanted to do those.
I believe
Because-
that.
I
Yeah,
thought they
it
were
was-
sets too. I never knew they actually went on the cruises.
they did some set work too. I think they
Yeah.
they did
Mhm.
some for some of the much smaller scenes, but when they're on the ship, they're on the ship and
Do you
they're
remember
at sea.
that they would show like the port and the people in line getting on the boat? and all
Yeah,
that
Yeah.
stuff?
yeah.
I was always like, oh my God, I can't wait to go on a cruise. Was no big deal. No, I'm joking. Cruises are fun. I'm going on one in September.
So
Excellent.
what sitcoms have you guys done in the way of like 80s sitcom,
Well, s- so in
family
season-
stuff or?
Yeah. In season 1, we really focused on sort of action adventure. So it was Scarecrow Mrs. King, Remington Steele, and Cagney and Lacey kind of round out our season. And we
Wait, no
we
Heart
ended
to
up
Heart?
spending we didn't do Heart to Heart. We end up because we'll get to it.
I'm kidding.
We took, we
There's
took
so
about-
many.
There's
know,
so
I
many.
know.
As soon as you start, you kind of like, oh, okay, we can go forever. Like it felt
I'm
like so
thinking
niche.
of like there are just so many.
There's so many.
Episodes.
And so we decided to concentrate on comedies for season 2, which we just
Oh,
started
good.
to work on. So for season 2, and maybe I don't know if we were going to hold this, but I'll tell you.
Oh,
So
God, I love it.
we're gonna look at It's a Living, which is
Oh,
yeah, I don't know if you
I
remember.
I
love
just heard the
that.
theme song in
Yeah.
my head. It's a living.
Yeah. And so that's very exciting because that has a lot of women, right? And
Mhm.
there are women that are working in the top hotel of the
Right.
Bonaventure Hotel in Los Angeles, and they
That was
they sort of shoot the opening at the Bonaventure in LA. And then we're also going to look at Designing Women.
Oh, yeah, I was just
of
gonna say,
course.
Designing Women.
the night.
And-
The lights went out.
Awesome.
Yes. And,
Awesome.
and we're looking at
Can I just
9 to
before we go
5.
on- Wait.
Yes.
Before we go on,
Oh,
just want to make this mental note really quick. Like, just put this out there, and then we'll go back to it. Wasn't Anthony one of the first like gay characters in an ensemble cast?
Here's the funny thing.
No.
I thought that too. He's not gay.
Yeah, he's not.
He's not gay. When I was, it's so
His
interesting
character
because I
wasn't?
hadn't.
I
No-
never thought he
no.
was gay. What did they?
And yet in my
Hallucinate?
head, for some reason, I had that too.
Wow.
Except when I'm like, oh, I had this completely wrong.
Wow.
I never thought he was gay.
Oh,
I know that's weird.
Everybody
I
was gay.
just,
Dude.
He
Okay,
actually got
so-
married in the
He gets
last
married.
season.
he gets
Oh,
married.
I might have given
He
up on
runs
the
away.
last
He
season.
he gets left at the altar at the last minute. And so then the
Oh.
girls take him to Vegas, where he ends up marrying a Vegas showgirl, Cheryl Lee Ralph, played by Cheryl Lee Ralph.
Oh, yeah.
She's having a rebirth right
Ah.
now.
No kidding.
Wow.
Cheryl Lee Ralph also in the last season of It's a Living.
Yep.
It's a
Yeah.
living. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah, so we're concentrating on some of the comedies. What I also want to look, I don't know if we'll do it this season, but because we run out of time, like I want to do
Yeah.
Fame, I want to do 227, I want to do a
Different
different
World.
world.
Mary.
So
What
those are
about
the
Knots
things-
Landing? Are
We'll
you going to
get
touch
there.
on Knots
Oh my
Landing?
God, there's so many. Yeah, those are like, yeah. I used to
the-
get so mad at my mother for having to put on her soaps, her nighttime.
Her soap. The nighttime soaps, the Dynasty, we definitely have to cover. We did talk to so we also got to do an interview with Eilish Zabrowski, who was Aaron Spelling's costumer. And
Oh
she
my
is
God.
adorable. She was the head costumer
Wow.
for Aaron Spelling. So she had a lot of love boat stories. She had a lot of Elizabeth Taylor
She was
stories.
probably the one that told us about
the
Love
going
Boat.
to Love Boat. Yes,
Yeah.
I think she was.
Going out.
Oh,
Yeah, people actually going.
wow.
And she also, what show were we just talking about? That made me think of Eilish because she worked on that show. She was Angela
Dynasty? I
Lansbury.
mean, Knots
Oh,
Landing?
Dynasty. Yeah, she was
Dynasty.
the costumer for Dynasty. So for
Oh my
And
God.
King Aaron
Also,
Spelling. She was
you know,
involved.
those iconic gowns when they were fighting in the pond. Or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
yes.
Oh my God. Yes.
So
That's
she and
incredible.
it's
That's
so
a whole
exciting.
season. Like adult or
Yeah.
primetime soap operas is like a whole
The whole
nother.
thing. Yeah.
Holy cow! Yeah.
And so many actors started on those soaps, the Ryan Hopes and the
Yes.
you're like, oh my God.
Oh,
we started
right.
yeah. And so it's been really exciting. It's been dreamy. Like, and now we're just like, oh, we got to
Yeah.
get everybody. I need everybody on the show.
Yeah.
No, and I think the thing is because so much time has passed, it probably feels really good to them, that someone's reaching out to them and they want to talk. I mean, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I don't want to. No, but yeah.
And people have
it's
been very
fantastic.
gracious about
They really
helping us
have.
find other people. So Sharon Gless, we interviewed Barney. Barney was like, oh, you got to talk to Tyne. He got
Yeah.
us to Tyne Daly. And then
Oh,
Tyne
I
Daly
love
says,
Tyne Daly.
you tell Sharon that I did the show and she'll come on your show.
Oh, she totally will. Yeah,
And
she
she
totally
did.
will.
She did, and she was absolutely lovely. And we had just a blast. And then she
She got us Karen Arthur, did she? Not
got
her-
us, she helped get us Karen
Yeah.
Arthur, who is a
Why does that
director.
sound familiar? I see the face.
Karen Arthur was the first woman to win a directing Emmy.
Yes. Okay.
Oh,
And she
remember
won
that.
it in 1985 for a
Okay.
Cagney and Lacey episode.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
her
isn't that
interview is
crazy?
fantastic. Yeah.
That
And then
is
it would be
amazing.
another 11 years before the next woman won.
wow.
That hurts. Like that, doesn't that hurt you in the heart a little bit?
Yeah.
It does.
God.
Doesn't surprise me, but it does hurt a little bit, sure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
And
Every
so-
year I watch like the award shows and I'm just like, this fucking sucks, like, God.
I mean, there is a shift. I think there's been such, it just takes it took like a decade and then another decade before
Yeah.
the third one, practically like 7 years after
Yeah.
Mimi Leader won for
ER?
ER.
Yeah. Oh,
That was
God,
the second
that's a
one.
good show too.
And then the last few years, it has been a more even playground.
yeah, more.
But what was interesting, so when I knew we were coming on your show, I was like, well, we haven't done an examination of LGBTQ in the 80s.
Because there was none.
'Cause there
Right,
was-
not
there was
much.
very-
It's a lot, but there was a little bit.
very tiny,
Yeah.
and that's very and you're like, so
You know-
that's interesting to me. So when
Mhm.
you're like watching television as a young person that is sort of going,
Teetering.
maybe
Yeah.
maybe I'm somewhere
it was
in this
ER.
world.
Now that you mention it, it was ER,
Yeah.
Dr. Weaver, right? So we
Yes.
had Michelle Bonilla on, who played her partner back then.
Oh,
And
Right. Yeah.
like I was like fangirling when we had her on because of that. It was
Yeah, yeah.
one of the first, like, where it was continued in the storyline. It wasn't just
a
passing
one-off.
through, right, character, or a one and done kind of thing. It was it was an actual arc. So I think that was probably the first time I really kind of sat up and said, in my mind, I was like, I can't believe they're showing this on TV, kind of thing, But on the flip side of that, it was like, thank God they're showing this on TV,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people, it woke people up, to say, wow, and at that time the show was like huge,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
they had
Yeah.
the audacity to have a lesbian storyline in it. It was just
Yeah.
not just a gay guy that's,
And that was a crazy thing. I was like, okay, I got to go find out, sort of, queer representation in the 80s. Again, very slim.
Mhm,
There's
mhm.
a Wikipedia list. I don't know how accurate it is.
Oh,
That
oh,
has
Thanks.
that breaks it down by the 80s, and there were about what was interesting. A couple of interesting things popped out for me. There were over 70 episodes of television. I didn't count the specials. Like every once in a while, like 60 Minutes would do a special about
Oh, yeah.
some
Yeah.
issue
Yeah.
in America,
an
right?
after school
So
special.
I'm not counting. I'm talking about scripted. I'm talking
Yeah.
about scripted television,
Right.
and there were over 70 episodes over the decade from 80 to
Wow.
89
Right.
that
So
would
10
have
years.
some sort of LGBTQ representation or discussion. Of those 70 episodes, about 6 had storylines that were about trans women.
Really?
Wow.
But
What do you think
we'll
was
come back to that
happening?
because I'll tell you why it's not as it's not as groundbreaking as you think it is. But and only as it sounds, and only 4 of the stories that I could find revolved around lesbians. Everything
Oh,
else was
What
gay
for?
males.
Which
Huh.
So
Right.
one of them was Hotel. Hotel had a one of the sons came out
Oh, right.
and
No,
then had and I'm trying to I have some notes here, but I don't have the notes on the Hotel episode that had the lesbian storyline. And these are just episodes with the
Yeah.
trans women. So the way the representation seemed to work, and again, I haven't done a study. This was like
Right.
let me look through and see. The storylines for these episodes were often revolved around when one character has been set up for dating a romance, and then it turns out that the other character is revealed to be gay,
Oh, okay.
sometimes trans.
Oh,
The surprise gay.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing that I thought was really interesting, and Barney Miller had
Yeah.
about 6 episodes where they had a recurring gay officer.
mm.
And the first episode sort of and it was revealed, and so this is how a lot of storylines went, where when gay slurs or homophobia is happening within the storyline, one of the recurring characters or a side character reveals that they are themselves gay in order to sort of make a
A
point.
lesson learning.
Mhm, mhm.
The
Yeah, yeah.
Lesson learning gay.
Okay.
That was Barney Miller. Although then they brought that character back and continued to. So it wasn't just a one-off, which I
Okay.
thought was very
Yeah.
interesting.
That's
And
cool.
and supposedly the showrunner actually worked with some version of GLAAD, I think, of the time, because this
Okay.
would have been the 70s, to
Yeah, I was
try
gonna
to
say
shape that
like
character.
some kind of sensitivity training type of thing.
Yes.
Okay.
But that and then several storylines around people thinking someone's gay and it
Oh,
causing
yeah.
consternation.
Cheers.
it's-
I just rewatched all of Cheers, and there was a lot of that.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then a lot of that on the Love Boat. Cagney and Lacey, and I managed to there was a second season Cagney and Lacey episode, which I did remember looking at, and I looked back at. So it's interesting is that a second season, episode 8, Conduct Unbecoming. Cagney and Lacey are working with a third undercover detective, played by Christopher Allport, to investigate illegal weapons that are about to hit the streets, right? They're these shipment of guns that have been stolen and are going to hit the streets in New York. And they're working with him going undercover. Separately, somebody realizes that he has posed nude in a gay magazine, this officer. He is put on suspension.
Yep.
He's like, I did that for 5 years before I became a cop. But the other people in the office are very upset.
Yep.
And he also says, I'm not gay. But he's put on suspension, and the storyline for Cagney and Lacey revolves around them having to decide whether they're going to basically break this case, which is still pending, with him, even though he's on suspension, which means they might get into trouble.
Right.
But they break the case, and it kind of helps him in his. He ends up instead of basically being fired, he ends up being suspended without pay for 6 months.
Wow.
But it was what I liked about it is it was a little more subtle, and at the end, he stops going, but I'm not gay. He just basically is sort of kind of, and it's not clear whether he is or isn't. He says at first he isn't, and he just did it for the money. But by the end of the episode, because one of his best friends, who's the beefcake guy, who's Mr. God, I'm blanking on the actor. Martin Cove. It's Martin Cove.
Yeah.
It's Becky. Becky has really been out of shape by it. And at the end, he's sort of,
you can see where that would be a thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
He basically kind of is just sort of turns it back on it. It's just like, what does it matter? Like we were cops and we were friends together, and kind of leaves it as that.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was actually pretty interesting. And then they had another, and then later in later seasons, I think they had a recurring character that was a neighbor of Cagney's that was gay.
Yes. Yeah.
And became a good friend of hers.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And recurred.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the Golden Girls.
And the
Yeah.
Golden Girls,
Yeah.
yes. And so you could get these one-offs that were really interesting. And then there's also what I just discovered is a thing, a trope, the first lesbian kiss. Do you guys know this?
No.
So apparently the first lesbian kiss on network television was in LA Law.
Oh, wow.
Oh, right.
Okay.
And it was the first ever romantic kiss between women on network television. And then they didn't do anything with it. So they had a bisexual character, I think was CJ Lamb, played by Amanda Donahoe.
Oh God, yeah.
And-
I can see her
And
so
she
clearly right now.
kisses
Yeah.
the straight lawyer Abby Perkins, played by Michelle Green.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think Michelle Green has talked about is it was just for ratings. They didn't
Of
end up
course,
doing
yeah.
anything with that storyline.
Yeah.
And so I think
You know
that
what sucks is that, first of all, that they would do that, but I feel like in today's time they will kill off or write off the lesbian before
before anybody can have a good time.
have it. Yeah, but
Yeah.
After they have a good time as
Right,
punishment.
yeah,
Like-
or whatever, before they can delve into things. But like
Right.
person of interest, like I think was the big one that started like a whole slew. Like there's a hashtag on Twitter and everything. And so I get it, and I feel like they do that for ratings too, in a weird way. Like, when they mess with a fan favorite, when they,
Mhm.
it drives me crazy. It's my most hated thing. It feels like it's such an easy go-to kind of thing. Like, oh, think harder, come up with something better. Like that's just, May and September, like
Well,
ratings.
because it's so clearly then through a different lens. And we talk about this, like who is creating these storylines.
Yeah,
And that's one
yeah.
of the things that sort of as you say, most impressive
Oh,
about
yeah.
Barney Rosenzweig, because
Mhm.
he was constantly filtering himself
Mhm.
and then surrounded himself by women, not just the women on the show, but
Behind the,
Barbara Corday, Barbara
Yeah.
Avedon, but ultimately Gloria Steinem. And like he was educating himself
yeah,
through that show
yeah.
and trying to shift his lens,
Mhm.
like the male gaze. He was actually trying to filter it to
Yeah.
make that show.
Yeah.
And that
Mhm.
it shows, it makes a difference.
And I feel
Um,
like all those lessons he learned, he threw them all into Trials of Rosie O'Neill. You know,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, big time,
Yeah.
big time. But I, you know, yeah, when I look back and I think about, you know, like the only, like all my like Buddy from Family, Christy McNichol, and then what was the sitcom later on?
Oh,
with
right.
Mulligan,
Oh, Empty
I don't know.
Nest? No.
Empty
She
Nest.
posed for
Yes.
Empty Nest,
Yes,
right?
Richard Mulligan,
Yes,
yes.
yeah. And they were the
I-
neighbors of the Golden Girls.
Yeah, yeah,
Right, it was a Golden
Yeah.
Girl
Like the
spinoff.
Golden Girls.
yeah.
They were the
I'm totally-
spinoff.
Yeah. I'm also totally forgetting about Sydney. Love Sydney.
Love Sydney.
Oh,
Love Sydney
yeah.
on television. Martha Smith, who was on Scarecrow and Mrs. King and came on our podcast, talked about that because she did the episode of basically when they basically tried to give Love Sydney a girlfriend, and she was the girlfriend that basically he has to say at the end, like, this isn't for me.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
But she talked about how carefully they really that the shame of that show is that they did not embrace that they had a gay character. They just sort of let it be kind of hidden and really
Yeah,
never
it's weird.
embraced it.
It was like they were foreshadowing what happened to Ellen. You know, like we don't want
Mhm,
that to happen,
mhm.
so we're going to be real careful with our words.
Right, right.
And
Yeah.
like Ellen just blew things up, you know, just blew up. And but you know, it broke down doors, you know, and she sacrificed a lot, you know, to do that.
She
and
did.
huge. That's huge.
So I'm curious, JD, what your shows were. Was there a show that you're like, oh, thank God, there's some representation that I connect with?
Queer as folk. JD is 10 years behind on everything.
More like
20
20.
sometimes.
The original
yeah,
British version or the American version of Queer
American.
as Folk?
The
the
American.
American version. Yeah, I never got into the British version, but
Me neither, and I
yeah.
live
You know, yeah. I mean, if are we talking 80s or just in
Yeah.
general? 'Cause
like, was there anybody in
80s.
the 80s that floated your boat?
I think, you know, I, as far as like the queer representation or just in general, I think, I kind of like that Buddy was a tomboy because I related to her.
Yeah.
I was like around her age when that show was on. So I remember like kind of, but then she had the boyfriend, they gave her the boyfriend, but
Yeah.
you know, that I think that was kind of, you know, I think that I almost related to her in that sense because when I didn't come out till much later in life, and I was in that position. I even had a boyfriend that looked like her boyfriend, who ended up being my husband for many years. But yeah, like I kind of related to that because she was this tomboy, and I was the same way. Like I didn't wear makeup. I was like athletic and stuff. And then she had the boyfriend, and I thought, well,
oh no,
kind of that's how, you know. But I didn't think. You know, I guess because I was too young at that point, but I like that later on with the Golden Girls, I love that they put that character in, that Dorothy had her college friend, best friend that was a lesbian, and she was afraid to say it, and then she didn't want anyone to know because she thought that they wouldn't accept her, and then she falls in love with Rose.
Yeah.
I was glad that they did that because, and what was nice about it was that her mom knew, like Sophia knew, and it didn't make a difference to her.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just thought that they really did that very well because I think there was a scene when Dorothy said to her mom, would you care if I was gay? And she said, it wouldn't matter to me one bit. I would love my children no matter what. And I thought that was a really cool thing
Yeah,
to
yeah.
put in there. And they made her brother a cross dresser, if you remember. So maybe that was kind of a trans touching upon that, because
Yeah.
you never saw him though, but they alluded to that she had the brother that was a cross dresser. So yeah, I think that probably those were the two.
It's crazy the way they did it back then in the 80s, where any kind of mention of gay, queer, lesbian, trans, whatever, it was almost like the network was watching, and the creators or the writers were kind of like just testing the water, like just
Yeah.
Right.
testing the
Right.
water a little bit, testing it. But I think that the ones that were handled with humor, had more of an impact on people,
Mhm, mhm.
as opposed to, well, my age, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't watch a lot of like a grown up, late night television or whatever, like whatever, my parents were watching. But when I was younger and watching sitcoms from 8 to 10 before bed, if there was, stuff like that was covered, because you would never see it in Laverne and Shirley, you would never see it in Happy Days, you would never,
Right.
in the
Right.
Americana, it was, in something, that is when it was in something funny and it was handled with humor, I feel like it, again,
It diffuses it for
teaching,
people.
yeah,
right?
exactly, yeah, there was more of an impact, and in a good way, as
Yeah.
opposed to like in a late night, in a grown-up one,
Well, the interesting thing about Golden Girls is that the pilot had a gay character. They had a cook in their house.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
there was
Fuck,
and
yeah.
so clearly it was sort of built to have a gay
Mhm.
character, and then they're like, let's cut that, because then they also
pull
like
back a little bit, let's just pull it back a little bit.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the reasons, and it's such an interesting concept. It is for women who decide to live together for financial reasons,
Yeah,
because they can't afford to live on their own.
right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so they and because their husbands are gone.
Right. Right.
And
That's
so
true.
that's just so like I remember being struck by that rewatching the pilot in the first few episodes.
Yeah.
is-
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I guess we have to pool our resources, and we can all come live with you.
Right.
And she's like, that's fine. And you pay
But
me
I look
rent.
at
And
the
it'll be
shows
Yeah,
great.
that
like,
is true.
that we're tackling, financial hardships, like, oh my God, I just blanked.
One day at a time. I'll throw one out.
Day at a time, right?
Oh, yeah.
The
Right.
one
Right.
with JJ Walker and John Amos and
Good times.
Jack,
Oh.
good times, right? Like, those were all, stories that centered around, that inequity, like,
Mm-hmm.
having hardships. And everybody was just eating them up, like,
Yeah.
"This is funny stuff, man, this is funny stuff." It's like, well,
And
you go
Alice.
back and watch
Also
it as an adult,
Alice.
you're like,
Alice.
this is painful, because there were times during like the Connors, moving current time,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that we just got it over here, so I just binged like all 4 seasons or 5 seasons or whatever, and I was just like, I can't believe how deep they're going about being poor here. Like, this is, it's making me uncomfortable.
Well,
I-
that was a big part of Roseanne, is bringing
Mhm.
back that kind of, and Grace Under Fire. I don't know if you remember
Yeah,
Grace Under
Yeah.
Fire.
Oh, yeah.
The sort
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
working
Brett
class.
Butler. Oh God, I just started watching Anger Management for some reason. Like, it just popped
Okay.
up on one of my streamers, and she got like a little background role as a bartender, and I'm telling you, she eats up every scene, and I love it. Brett Butler was a treasure.
Yeah. Oh,
But I
yeah.
think that's an interesting thing, like how unusual it is actually now to have, maybe not as much in streaming, but right before streaming kind of hit, but to have sort of, a lower class, working class representation that you had a lot more of in the 70s and 80s.
Mhm.
And now it feels like an anomaly. I remember,
Yeah.
who's Raising Hope,
Mm.
Oh,
which
yeah.
I love. I love that show.
Mhm.
And mostly because of the actress that I'm blanking on now.
Martha.
Um,
Martha
Pl-
Plimpton?
Martha Plimpton? No.
yes,
Yes,
Martha
yes.
Plimpton, who I
Yeah.
love.
She's doing
also
a
the
British
baby.
series here right
I
now.
gotta tell you, I'm a
She's
sucker
doing,
for.
I'm sorry,
Oh,
she's doing
yeah.
what?
She's doing a British series over here right now.
Is she?
Really?
Okay.
Yeah,
What's
she
it called?
spends a lot of time here, man. She's always in London. But yeah, she's doing a Sky original that looks amazing. Like I really can't wait because I do love her too. You
Yeah.
know,
So I mean, I remember loving that show, but also noting like we were like, this takes a lot of discussion now with the network to put on a family that is struggling.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
They don't.
Yeah.
They would much rather, and they really want just people in fancy homes. You know, like
Yeah.
they want everything to
think-
look like Dynasty or
Where you
the,
well, not
the
even so,
modern
like,
version
but
of Dynasty.
when they show like a 20 or 30-year-old, you know, that has these glamorous apartments and stuff, and you're expected
Yeah.
in New York, they have these amazing penthouse apartments.
Right.
I'm just like, Jesus, God, aren't we past this yet? You know, let's bring it down a notch. Jeez.
Friends
I
may have a
think
lot
it
to do
was-
with that because there's no way they could have afforded that.
Yes.
That
Oh,
apartment, and they tried to
exactly.
pass it off, but still,
It's like she works in
Monica's
a coffee
grandmother's
shop, right?
apartment. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It was like, why is Joey and Chandler's apartment so shitty? And Monica's got this glamorous palatial because of her grandmother.
Unfortunately, I think a lot of the influence is coming from the reality TV where they have
Mhm.
like the housewives of Orange County, like all of these fancy, and the Kardashians and the $1 million real estate and the Married to Medicine, like they're all over the top, you know, just
Yeah.
rich people. And unfortunately that reality show whole entity, I think, has really brought the curve down for a lot of TV, in
Oh,
my
totally.
opinion. Even
Yeah.
though I watch it,
Yeah.
like my guilty pleasure,
Don't
some of those shows.
say it. Don't say it. Don't.
It is my guilty pleasure, but
Don't say it.
I'm not gonna say it.
Damn it.
All right.
No, but
So
I think that the public's fascination with wealth, you know, is I think I'm predicting that we're going to move away from that, you know, like I just
Hopefully.
feel like people are kind of done with it. It's only Bravo TV watchers that are in like they're the ones- TLC, Bravo,
I think-
right? But
I think
you
it's
know.
like you say, Denise, though, because then the young people feel like they need to be there already. They need to be driving the fancy cars and living in those really nice apartments. And they like just think that's where they need to be, like in real life, even though they're watching it on TV.
yeah,
So I
I'd
agree
much
with that.
rather watch like a scripted TV program any day.
Yeah.
Oh, me
definitely.
too.
Oh, yeah.
Can't, like I just
Yeah.
really don't do the reality thing at all. I can't stomach it.
Yeah.
Unless it's competition. Like I was really addicted to Traders, and because it started in Denmark, and then the UK did a version of it, and then instantly the US did a version of it, and we were comparing it, you know, like they had no celebrities on the UK one. They were just common people that they plucked and threw into a castle and had to play the game, you know, and
well,
and
now
the-
I know what you're talking about because I didn't even know that show.
oh yeah, yeah.
No,
Now I
I did watch the first season. It's not my cup of tea when it comes to competition reality shows. I don't like the ones that require you to fool other people,
I
try to
cheat.
manipulate other
Yeah,
people.
right.
I mean, I love The Amazing Race for the reason that you can't do that
It's
and
so
win.
pure. It's so
Yeah,
pure
from
right?
that
Yeah.
standpoint. You
Yeah.
cannot play the game that way. In fact, they have
Mhm.
rules that prevent you from doing that. But
Right.
to each his own, you know.
I know, but you know,
Right,
the thing was,
right.
my wife had a really good point when we were watching Traders, because I was like, oh, I can't wait for season 2. She said, you know what, they're not going to get much more out of it because everybody watches it and now they know all the avenues to play, you know, whether
Mhm.
it's villainous or whether it's a suck up or whether it's, you know, and it's not going to be, nothing is ever going to be as good as the first one because it was so different and so original, you know, and I'm like, oh yeah, she's right, she's right. So yeah, we probably won't end up watching it now at this point.
It may surprise you. They may still figure out a way to make it
Maybe.
as charming in the way that they were able to in the first season. You never know.
Yeah. They
I mean,
had
Survivor is on Survivor
right?
40,000
I
or
was gonna
something.
say-
I mean,
Season 45, right? My God, only The Simpsons has been on longer.
Right,
God, and every channel over here, The Simpsons are Friends. Unbelievable.
right, right.
Wow, they love American programming over here. Seriously, we have like one whole network that's called CBS. What is it? CBS Reality. I don't know why, because no reality shows on it, but it's just CBS top shows. 5 US
Okay.
only. All
oh
cop
my God.
and
It makes me a little,
CIS. Yep.
it scares me a little bit that that's what people think law enforcement is.
Oh my
in the
God.
United
I was getting
States.
this is a true story. When I had to take the British citizenship test in order to get my indefinite leave to remain. And we had to go up to Birmingham and, get fingerprinted and retina scanned and all this other stuff. And so I'm sitting in the waiting room, and this extremely Eastern European gentleman says to me, like, where are you from or whatever? I said, originally Florida, but now he's like, Florida. He was like, oh, Miami and CIS, is it CSI Miami?
Right.
I want to go to Miami because of that show. And I'm like, oh, honey, it's nothing
Like
like
that.
that, right? One wrong turn off of Collins Avenue, and
Right, right.
you're in Little
You're in
Havana,
Cuba.
man. It's like, I didn't want to burst this bubble, but I was just like, ooh, but yeah, that's what they glean from it. That's what they think, bikinis, sun, glossy,
Mhm.
it's glossy and shiny. And so, yeah, it's quite the misconception.
Right.
Well, and that started with Miami Vice, didn't it?
Oh God,
Yeah,
oh, man.
yeah.
Jesus.
Back to the 80s.
I know. I was just
Not to-
thinking at my mother's
I'm obsessed.
restaurant. This is no
True.
joke. There was a poster of Don Johnson and Philip Michael Thomas. There was a poster of Bruce Willis from Moonlighting. And then my my cousin, who is my mother's business partner, on her wall, she had John Travolta. And this is in the back room, in the kitchen of the restaurant, in the kitchen. It's just all 80s men, like all 80s TV men. It was just the funniest thing. Like I so vividly remember that.
Remember
Don
that.
Johnson, Bruce Willis, and John Travolta, and there was one other one I can't remember it, but
I love that because like that feels like a teenage girl room.
yeah, it was our kitchen. Yeah, it was our kitchen. My mother had a thing for Don Johnson, man. She used to turn off the lights and take the phone off the hook when Miami Vice would come on. No bullshit, man. No bullshit. Don't knock at the door. Don't call me. That's it.
Well, because there was no time shifting then. You had to watch it when it aired or you
That's
were going to
right.
miss it.
Yeah.
So,
That's
yeah.
right.
Let me tell you
Just-
something. My parents could not figure out a VCR to save their lives. I'm lucky they could hook the Atari. My God, it took my dad 3 days to hook up an Atari.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. You had to watch
had
it when it was
to.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing. I wish it was always like that. Like I really, so I feel like I get that the streaming services, it's a whole new way of doing things, but Jesus Christ, I have to keep notes on my phone, like what show is on what streamer, like
Yeah.
Netflix, or is it on Amazon, or is it now on Paramount Plus? Is it on Peacock? Is it on I'm so screwed up at this point. Like I have to look at the phone so I can, continue. Like I want to watch the next season. I can't remember what streamer it's on. So it's
And
yeah.
then there's sometimes so long between seasons now. Like
Yes.
there's no schedule for
Times
anything.
that by a year for everything over here. So
Oh, right.
Oh, right.
like
So-
we're on, like, this is a good example. We're on like season 19 of Grey's Anatomy. There's only been 6 episodes and it's been 4 months. I was blaming it on the Super Bowl, like the hype, and I'm like, okay, well, obviously it's not that. Is there mid-season breaks? Oh, is that
There is. And, because again, my husband works on a show called Titans, which is
Okay.
about like the DC Comics, Teen Titans is on HBO.
Yeah.
Max or whatever it's called now, Discovery Max
Plus,
plan,
Like,
plus plan,
yeah.
Discovery in
Warner
HB
Brothers.
again. I don't know. But and then they used to like dump the episode, they did the week to week for a while, and then they started dumping episodes like 3 at a time. And then this year for the 4th season, they're like, we're going to show week to week for, for 6 episodes. Then we're going to take a really random long break. And then we're going to start the last 6.
So there's a thought process behind it. Like someone's come up with this.
Someone come up with a plan. I don't know how much of a thought process there is.
I'm
I'm not
amazed.
sure.
I think an algorithm shot that out to them, an AI algorithm of television streaming plan.
I am utterly amazed that it's a thing. Like I in my mind, I'm thinking it has to be like it's award season, it's Super Bowl season. Like maybe everything is just off for that.
Yeah,
But-
it
and
may
I'm-
have been that, and they wanted like it also for so many of these streamings, it all revolves around subscriptions.
Yeah.
What will launch the most subscriptions and
Yeah.
continually launch subscriptions? And I think that's a real shame right now, because there's some shows that have been really, really great, and then they just do like 1 or 2 seasons of them, and then they're like, yeah, we don't need them anymore because we just needed people to show up.
Yes.
And now that
I'm
they're
so
in,
worried about Apple
most of them will
TV
keep
in
that.
way. Like
Yeah.
that's
it's not long-term thinking.
right.
No,
It's
yeah.
like Ted Lasso, they're already talking like the 3rd season is going to be the last season, and I'm like, are you kidding me? And the same thing with the morning show. Like
They-
I
you know, they claim-
subscribed to Apple for this stuff, and then for 3 seasons, and
Yeah.
3 and out. Like wow.
I don't think there'll ever be a streaming show that will last as long as Grey's Anatomy has lasted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I can't see that happening. Which
And-
is
Or
yeah,
And
hello,
I-
The Simpsons.
I
Yeah,
believe that's because of the gays. I feel like the gays will always stand by Grays. You know, like even though there's
Gays
no
for
more
Grays.
Cali, there's no more Arizona, doesn't matter. The gays still stand by Grays. It's crazy.
And what about SVU? That's like those people had to
Ugh.
have a job for life with that. I mean, they
20 years, yeah.
got old, went from young to being older, old with that show. It's
I
still
always
doing
think about that, like the 80s kids, like where they literally grew up on a set, because at that time you did have like 7, 8, 9, sometimes 10 seasons of like,
Yeah, yeah.
like I said, I watched Cheers from the 1st season to the last
Same.
season
Mhm,
recently.
same.
And look at Woody Harrelson. He was such a baby.
Such a
You
baby.
know? Oh my God.
right.
And, I looked at like even the first couple of seasons of when Frasier came into it, he was like so young, and by the
Yeah,
end, when he got his spin-off, I'm like, holy cow. Like, they all just like became grown-ups like in front of our eyes. It's just
It's so
crazy.
weird. It's so weird looking back at 80s television and going, oh my God, everyone is so young.
Yeah.
Right?
Stephanie Zimbalist and Pierce Brosnan they're just so young and beautiful.
It's
You just can't
unbelievable.
stand it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember my aunt had such a thing for Robert Wagner. So like they
Oh,
Yeah.
kicked
well.
us out like when Heart to Heart came on. Get out of here. Something to
Go home.
do. Okay.
Well,
all
and
right.
before Heart to Heart, there was another series he did with Eddie
The same.
Albert.
Albert.
not the
Eddie
same.
Albert.
It Takes a Thief, I think it was called.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He played a thief, and Eddie Albert was his government handler and they would go solve crimes together because they needed his help to infiltrate or steal something back or whatever. It was a great show. It was a lot of fun.
It was another good one. There were so many. Like I
Yeah.
go back to like binging on Starsky and Hutch. Like I remember
Oh,
that
yeah.
coolest show
Yeah.
with that car and Dukes of Hazzard, and I mean, gee, Simon and Simon, another
Simon
one.
and Simon. That show got saved when Cagney and Lacey got canceled the first time
I
Oh.
I remember that. Yes.
because
And
it
whatever
had just
happened
been
to the-
canceled too.
Whatever happened to the blonde guy? Because Gerald McRaney.
Oh,
Jameson
Jameson Parker?
Yeah, he's still working. I mean, he hasn't gone on to like have his own show, I don't think.
Right.
Yeah.
But like Gerald McRaney had a couple, but he shows up as the guest star and
Does he?
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
crazy. But yeah, Gerald McRaney, because I watch NCIS or whatever, and Los Angeles, his character is perfect. Just a grumpy, nasty.
Well, and he is married to Delta Burke from
Burke,
Designing
yeah.
Women.
From Designing
they,
Women.
I think they met on Designing Women. They certainly
They
are
did.
in scenes together. He plays her one of her exes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Don't they seem like
Yes.
an unlikely couple? I don't know. He just seems so grouchy, and she just, like I loved her in Popular and Ryan Murphy's first
Oh yeah.
show, because a friend of mine was Carly Pope was the star of that with Leslie Bibb, who went on to like big things. And that was like a CW show, and it had 2 seasons, two seasons, and it ended on this massive cliffhanger, and then they didn't get renewed, and so we'll never know what happened.
Oh, they never ended that.
That's so
Right.
tough.
Yeah.
That's
Hate
so tough.
that.
Oh man, that's just it's crazy. I just looked at the clock, and I can't believe we've kept you guys.
Okay. I know we've talked and talked and
Kept you
talked.
guys. I never expected to keep you this long. I'm so sorry.
Oh,
This
we
was
could,
so
trust,
fun.
as you can tell, we could continue
We
on.
could keep talking.
quite
We
some
go on
time.
forever.
I got to shout out Xena Warrior Princess.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Yes.
Because for the younger generation that I know, that show for lesbians
Yeah.
just is made saved their lives.
Oh
Right?
my
And
god.
Yeah.
gave them some, they
Hope.
really changed
Gave
their
us
lives.
hope. Yeah. So
Oh.
I had a roommate, right? I had a roommate after I had come out, and I had my own little place and everything. And about a year into it, my friend went through a bad breakup with her girlfriend, so she moved in, and with her she brought a life-size Xena Warrior cardboard cutout that was in my kitchen.
I think I saw that. No.
It was like-
You have it.
I think I have
Kind of
pictures
the
of it. I have
equivalent.
pictures.
It was in your kitchen, so kind of the equivalent of your mom's posters.
Kind of. Yeah.
kind.
Well, I was like, yeah, kind of. But like a condo is so small, right? And like when you open the front door, you are literally looking into it was like the dining part of the kitchen, and there was Xena like right there, and it was the funniest thing. And like I was never a huge fan, but my roommate would make me sit there and watch the shows. So I came out of it like a huge fan. Like I didn't go into it a big fan, but I came out of it a huge fan. And I'll tell you what is really cool is that over here, there's a show called My Life is Murder, and it stars Lucy Lawless. And it is so good. It's very like Castle-ish,
Okay.
like
Okay. Yeah.
retired cop still solving,
Yeah.
crimes
Okay.
for the police department and stuff. But she's so good. It's got like it's just funny. It's really refreshing to see her playing someone sarcastic and funny.
Yeah.
I just absolutely love
Oh
this
my
show.
g-
And it
I
takes
want to try
place
to
in,
find that show. I'd
takes
watch
place
that show.
in Australia and New Zealand.
My Life is Murder.
Mhm.
Hopefully it'll find its way over here at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, it's really, really good. Like does play a retired cop. And I think she retired because her husband died, but we haven't gotten that far yet. She's got like a little sidekick that does all her cyber stuff and tech stuff, who's hilarious because like she rubs Lucy Lawless the wrong way, but she's completely unaware that she does. It's fantastic. It's got all these weird, quirky little side stories. Like even though she's a retired cop, she also bakes sourdough bread for a local bakery. It's very but again,
Oh,
it's
God,
like
I love that.
Castle, and she's gonna solve the murder every time. She's never gonna get like hurt or beat up or anything. She doesn't even carry a gun, and she doesn't even make the arrest. She just like snaps her fingers, and the guy that she works for shows up. And it's just
It sounds like a little bit like
like
Murder, She Wrote, like the British Murder, She Wrote.
yeah,
Yeah,
kind of,
yeah.
There you go.
kind of. But it's really good to see Lucy Lawless on TV again in such a different kind of role. Like, it wasn't Spartacus. That's a good thing. And And
Right.
it's not Xena, it's like just easy watching. You can scroll your fingers, you don't know what's gonna happen.
And using her New Zealand accent, I would
Yes.
imagine.
Yep. And the guy that is in oh my God, I just said the name of it's my wife too. Virgin River on Netflix.
Mm.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that guy
Martin something. Yeah.
Martin, so you're right. He plays her brother. Yeah. So it's like, and he can use his real accent. They're all using their own mother tongue. It's fantastic. It's fun. Well, listen, you guys, this has been amazing. When is your second season dropping?
That is a good question
It
because
is.
we are just kind of redoing the schedule because one or more of our next interviews might end up being two-parters. And so, but I'm going to say April,
I was thinking more like May.
It
wasn't
might be May. It might be May because I haven't done the math. We drop every 2 weeks. We're
So you guys-
currently in,
okay.
in
Every
Cagney
2
and
weeks.
Lacey. We're dropping our Cagney and Lacey series, which is like 7 episodes. And we dropped the two Barney interviews are just out now. And then in 2 weeks, we drop Time Daily talking about Cagney and
Oh, I
Lacey.
gotta see
She
that one.
lovely?
And
Oh,
then
she's
follow
so
that up with
lovely.
Sharon Glass. So
I got to meet her like real quick when she came to Sharon's play, and I met her. This is after it made it to the West End. Like I worked with her while it was in at the Riverside
Florida.
Theater.
Oh,
Yeah, there too. I did go see the play at the Coral Gables Theater, and when they were workshopping it, and we met, Sharon then again. She was on my podcast like 3 times. We met at the Gables show, and then met her again to do an interview before the play opened at Riverside, where they were workshopping it in London. And then
is this Round-Heeled Woman?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
cool.
It was really good.
That's so cool.
But her assistant had to go back to the States, so she asked me to fill in for the time that her assistant was away. So I was like a PA that didn't know nothing about being a PA. But she did not hold me accountable for that. That was lovely. So it was really just like spending 10 days with your idol. Basically.
That's amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was great to be able to have her back on the show and talk about that. That was funny because I was a bit clumsy. Yeah, so I can't wait to hear the Barney ones. I'm really
Yeah.
So you
yeah.
can check those out now, and then we're wrapping up this season with several Cagney and Lacey episodes, and then we will start season 2 in May. So it's coming quick, and then we'll be doing more comedies. But I'm really excited, and we got to have you guys on the show. I want to sort of
Love
talk
to.
more about queer representation in the 80s. I think that's an important conversation to have on our show.
Definitely, man.
And it would be great to have you on. It's
Oh,
delightful,
totally.
conversation.
Totally.
I'm gonna try and find I'm gonna try and find some of my my friends that work in LA, like the working actors, and pick their brains a little bit because they were all around the same age. So it'd be great to Michelle would be fantastic for you guys to get. She's on Twitter, Michelle C. Benia, and she was the one that
okay.
in ER. And she's super, super receptive, and she's fun to follow on Instagram too. And I'm sure she would love to do it.
Awesome.
That would be great. That would be great.
Yeah.
We love hookups and love our guests. And JD, I want to hear more about your music and because you seem to be
Thank
doing
you.
my kind of music.
Thank you. I'd love
that
to.
I
Well,
like, so
Go
we'll
to
have you on. You can
jddanner.com.
yeah. If you go to my
jddanner.com.
website.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for checking that out. jddanner.com has all my music on
I
it.
love it.
And right now, I
I'm
have
literally
it.
flying across the Atlantic to watch her and the band.
She literally is. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
We're
love
gonna have to
it.
give you a tambourine or something and get up there and play tambourine.
No way.
I wrote a song about Ellen when she came out and she lost her show and everything, like back then. I wrote a song called Come Out and Dance, and I tried every way to get that song to her. I just couldn't get it to her, you know, the way the world is, but
Such a good song too.
and I wrote it for that. So it's not on my website. It's from my very first CD, but maybe I'll send it to you guys because it's kind of relevant that I wrote it about how she lost everything when she came out, you know, but then she triumphed years after that. But my music is on my website and it's downloadable for this couple of months. I have it, everything on the website is downloadable free. Until I put it back up into the digital, we have to pay for it. But I figure if you come to my website, my gift is my song.
Oh,
Fantastic.
yeah. Well, ladies, this has been an absolute pleasure. It would be an honor to be on yours anytime. We're here for
totally.
you. And we appreciate you actually spending so much time. So generous. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Oh,
Thank you for having us. This
it's
has been
been fun.
so much fun.
all
I,
right.
I
Yeah,
love it. This is a
awesome.
topic we should revisit every couple of months, I think.
Let's.
Definitely. Okay. Have a great night. Thank you again so much. Bye-bye.
Why do you always run back to the lover you once knew? You're addicted to her touch.
Like never stop chasing your dreams.
And I confess,
See?
my addiction is you.
We drank way too
Don't
much
ask me
whiskey.
why I'm here tonight. I had to take this midnight drive to find you. And as I come in through the door, I see her dancing on the floor beside you. Why do you always run back to the lover you once knew? You're addicted to her touch, that's true. And I confess, my addiction is you. You look at me and in my eyes you see the hurt I can't disguise. I watch you, and though it seems I look right through, I'm noticing your every move. She's got you. Why do you always run back to the lover you once knew? You're addicted to her touch, that's true. And I confess, my addiction is you. You're my addiction. Why do you always run back to the lover you once knew? You're addicted to her touch, that's true. And I confess, my addiction is you. I turn away to mask the pain, but jealousy reveals my rage.